we are going to look at statement classification today. So with statement classification, this is looking at what statement is a particular account going to go with. So just to kind of review, our last worksheet that we worked on was the account classification. And so an account is an individual accounting record. It is a record of a specific asset, liability, equity, revenue, or expense account. So it is very important that we understand the classification for each account so that we know what statement each account would actually go on. So the three statements that we're going to be looking at are the income statement. The income statement is a statement that computes net income or loss over a period of time, and it is going to include revenues and expenses. So if our account classification shows that it's a revenue or an expense, it is going to go on the income statement. The statement of owner's equity is our second statement, and this statement shows a change in the capital account over a period of time. So things that go on the statement of owner's equity are going to include those owner's equity items. So if it's classified as an item in equity, then it would go on the statement of owner's equity. For our balance sheet, this is the third statement that we look at, and it pretty much is that basic accounting equation. And if you'll remember going back into that basic accounting equation, what we saw was that assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. And so when we are looking at that, that is what we are going to see on our balance sheet. Now this owner's equity that we're looking at here, that is actually going to be the capital portion, is what we're going to see on our balance sheet. What it looks at is it's just the company's financial position at any given time. So what we look at with this is, what is happening with that particular company. So for this worksheet, what we see is that we have to decide if these are going on the income statement, the balance sheet, or the statement of owner's equity. So the first one that we look at is cash. And if you will recall, cash is an asset account, and asset accounts are found on the balance sheet. The next account we have is accounts payable. Remember, a payable means that we are looking at a liability account, and liabilities accounts are also found on the balance sheet. Then we get to sales. Now, sales is a revenue account, and all of our revenues go on the income statement. We then have rent expense, and so rent expense is an expense, and expenses go on the income statement. Then we get to inventory. Inventory is an asset account, and all of our assets go on the balance sheet. Next is supplies expense. Supplies expense is an expense account. Expense accounts go on the income statement. Then we have service revenue. Service revenue is a revenue account. Revenue accounts are going to go on the income statement. We have wages payable. Wages payable is a liability. Liabilities go on the balance sheet. And then we have capital. Now, capital is a rare item because capital is that equity account, so it is part of that owner's equity that we see. But with capital, it's actually going to go on two statements. All right, and the two statements that the capital is going to go on is that statement of owner's equity, and then it's also going to be found on the balance sheet. So when we look at that statement of owner's equity, as well as looking at the balance sheet are the two accounts that capital is going on, and that's the only account that we're going to see on two different accounts. Wage expense, that is an expense account. Expenses are found on the income statement. Your prepaid insurance is an asset, and assets are found on the balance sheet. Drawing is also part of our equity, but this is the decrease in equity, and this is only going to be found on that statement of owner's equity. Supplies, office supplies is an asset account, so that goes on the balance sheet. We have fees earned as a revenue account. Revenue accounts go on the income statement. Fee expense is an expense account, and that means that it would also be on that income statement. When we look at some of these other accounts, what we're seeing, I'm sorry, I probably should have left that there so you could still look at it. What we see with land is an asset account, and our assets always go on our balance sheet. If we remember that unearned revenue is going to be a liability, and our liabilities also go on that balance sheet. Building is an asset, and assets go on the balance sheet. Remember, I said if you ever see the word receivable, that automatically means it's an asset, and that is going to go on the balance sheet. A patent is an intangible asset, which would go on the balance sheet. Unearned fees, just like unearned revenue, is a liability account, and all of our liabilities go on the balance sheet. We have insurance expense. Keyword there is expense, so that's an expense. Expenses are found on the income statement. Keyword here is payable. Payable means liability. Liabilities are found on the balance sheet. A copyright or a trademark is also an intangible asset, and those are found on the balance sheet. The equipment is an asset, and that is found also on the balance sheet. And then if you remember, we talked about fees before. Fees are a revenue item. So again, revenues can be lots of different things. When we deal with expenses, most of the time they're going to have the word expense. If we're dealing with a liability, we see the word unearned, or we see the word payable associated with it. When you just see the word fees, that is a revenue account. And this revenue is going to go on the income statement. So hopefully you see why it is so important for us to understand what the account classification is for all of our accounts, because the account classification is so vital and is so important in determining what statement that particular account is going to go on. The next one that you guys are going to be looking at worksheet wise is the debit and credit worksheet. And with the debit and credit worksheet, it is also very, very important that you understand those account classifications. So just make sure you are going through them. If you need further clarification on account classifications, then please go back and watch the account classification video, review that account classification worksheet again, because it is very, very important that you understand what the different classification accounts are going to be.